The boardroom wasn't built for compassion. Frosted glass walls, brushed steel chairs, cold light bleeding down from fluorescent panels. It was a kind of place where empathy went to die. And that morning, it was full of the usual predators, elbows on table edges, ties just slightly loosened to feign confidence, voices dipped an octave too low to sound important. They barely noticed the nurse in the corner. She was small, brown-skinned, early 30s, maybe, wore a name badge that read Layo Adebayo, IN. Her hands were clasped behind her back, her face unreadable, like she'd been in too many rooms like this before and stopped expecting warmth. The man who had summoned her, Dr. Martinez, didn't even look up as she entered. Finally, he said, waving her over like a server, "Let's get this over with." She didn't move. He sighed. I said, "I heard you," she replied softly. A few of the younger XX exchanged glances. One tried not to smirk. Hess didn't notice. He never did. He was already mid-rant, launching into some tirade about liability forms, patient non-compliance, and how the nurses at Mercy West Medical were barely qualified to administer aspirin. He threw around phrases like protocol deviation and budgetary inefficiency, and then he said it. "She's just a nurse. She's not here to speak." The silence that followed wasn't immediate, but it arrived, slow and thick, like a tide pulling in shame. And that's when Dr. Martin has collapsed. His words caught in his throat mid-sentence. His hands twitched. His body jolted sideways, knocking over a coffee cup. And suddenly, the most powerful man in that room was convulsing on the floor, foam at his mouth, choking on his own breath. Panic exploded. Someone yelled for a defibrillator. Someone else dialed 112 but fumbled the phone. And the only person who moved with purpose was her. She was on her knees beside him in seconds. "Roll him," she said calmly. "Now." No one moved. She looked up. I said, "Roll him onto his side, unless you want him to die in a room full of Ivy League degrees." They scrambled. Someone muttered, "What's happening?" Respiratory seizure, based on the tremors and vitals, possibly serotonin syndrome or fentanyl interaction. How the hell do you? I read the last 10 entries in his case notes. None of you did. She opened a black bag she brought with her, not a designer tote, not a laptop case. A soft canvas emergency medkit. Prepared, measured, professional. She pulled out a vial, drew a dose, injected into the lateral thigh. Dr. Hess's body jolted. He stopped convulsing, began to breathe. The room stayed frozen. 2 minutes later, EMTs burst in, but they weren't needed anymore. He was stable, conscious, and staring up at her. "What happened?" he mumbled, blinking hard. "You collapsed," she said. "You had a reaction to medication, one your chart said you weren't even prescribed." I don't understand." "You don't have to," she replied. "You just need to stop signing prescriptions you don't read." Flashback. 4 weeks earlier, Layo Adebayo had been pulled into a closed-door disciplinary review. A 92-year-old patient in ICU had coded unexpectedly. Dr. Hess had blamed her for not catching a cardiac misread. Said she was negligent, inattentive, except she wasn't. She'd flagged a discrepancy in the patient's vitals twice, once verbally, once in the report, but no one read it, and the patient died. She didn't fight the accusation, didn't yell, just stared at Hess and whispered, "You signed the override." He told her she was overreacting. Then he put her on temporary leave. What he didn't know is that she didn't go home. She investigated. She found 7 similar cases, all involving the same prescriber, all hidden behind layers of plausible deniability and misfiled digital charts, all fatal. What they called nurse oversight was something else entirely. And this meeting? It was the beginning of her turning the knife. Back in the boardroom, Dr. Hess sat on the stretcher, wheezing into an oxygen mask. He tried to speak again, but this time the room didn't listen to him. They were all looking at her. "Ms. Adebayo," someone said finally, carefully, "would you be willing to walk us through your version of events?" She met the man's eyes. There was no triumph in hers, no gloating, just tired resolve. "I'll show you everything," she said, "but only once you put in writing that this meeting is being recorded and I am not under investigation." And then she handed him a flash drive. They called her just a nurse. But when the empire started collapsing, she was the one holding the evidence. And this is just the beginning. Silence wasn't just in the room. It was in the hallways that led out of it. In the long, sterile corridors of Mercy West Medical, where the hum of fluorescent lights felt louder than the whispers, where interns walked faster when they saw Layo Adebayo, unsure whether to salute her or avoid her altogether. 2 days had passed since Doctor has collapsed at the boardroom table. And now, Layo was sitting in legal conference room 4B, a smaller space with beige walls and no windows. Across from her sat 2 suits, hospital legal counsel and a compliance officer. Behind them, a speakerphone pulsed with quiet static. Someone else was listening, watching. She could feel it. The flash drive sat in the center of the table. Untouched, no one had said a word in 6 full minutes. Finally, the lawyer leaned forward. He was pale, polite, and afraid to show it. "This," he said softly, "could burn the entire hospital to the ground." Layo didn't blink. Then maybe the foundation wasn't solid to begin with. The compliance officer cleared his throat. "We need to understand what you're alleging." "I'm not alleging anything," she replied. "The records speak for themselves." But these prescriptions, Hess didn't enter them directly. There were proxies, overlapping logins. "Exactly," she cut in. "You think he was sloppy. He wasn't. He was careful. Smart enough to hide behind rotating interns, expired credential logins, nurses on shift swaps. But every one of those fatal cases has his override signature buried 3 screens deep. And you found all this while on leave." "I wasn't on leave," she said quietly. "I was on watch." Flashback. The night she got pulled from ICU, Layo didn't go home. She went to the hospital archives, the digital backup terminals, the ones no one checks because they run off legacy code. She stayed there for 6 hours. No gloves, no breaks, no anger either, just method. Each case had a pattern. A patient flagged as high risk, an override, an admin note filed after hours. She traced 6 months of activity. One by one, the stories lined up. One patient had coded after a mislabeled injection. Another died after an allergy was missed on file. In each one, Hess had intervened, not to help, but to bury. And the last one, the elderly man from ICU, Layo saw something no one else had noticed. The man wasn't even supposed to be there. His original chart belonged to a different facility. He'd been transferred without protocol, a move that only someone very high up could have approved. Present, the lawyer finally picked up the flash drive, plugged it in, clicked the first folder. "Why now?" he asked. Layo looked him dead in the eye. "Because when he collapsed, I saw something." "What?" She paused. "Fear, not of death, of exposure." The voice on the speakerphone finally spoke. Deep, measured, corporate. "Ms. Adebayo," it said, "we're going to need time to review these materials, but we appreciate your initiative. Please remain discreet while we investigate." "Are you putting me under a gag order?" "No," the voice replied. "We're asking you, politely, to be careful." That word lingered. Careful. Layo rose from her chair, collected her bag, looked at them one last time. Careful is how this all got started. And then she left. That night, her apartment was quiet. Too quiet. She lived in a modest high-rise near the hospital. No plants. No clutter. Just shelves of medical journals. Framed photos of her grandmother and a notebook that never left her side. She sat at the table and opened it. Inside, handwritten names. Some crossed out. Some circled. At the bottom, 3 letters in red ink. MWM. Mercy West Medical. A knock came at her door. 3 soft taps. She froze. No one knew where she lived. No one ever came. She didn't move. Another knock. Then silence. When she finally opened the door, the hallway was empty, except for one thing on the floor. An envelope. No stamp. No name. Just a white slip of paper inside. She opened it. One sentence. You're not the only one watching. Her breath caught. Outside, the streetlight flickered. The war had just begun. She thought exposure would bring justice. But truth has enemies. And Mercy West wasn't just hiding malpractice. It was hiding something bigger. The envelope stayed on her table all night. Unopened, it would have been a threat. Opened, it was a promise. Layo Adebayo didn't sleep. She didn't eat. She sat at her kitchen table with the light off, the whole way outside flickering through her blinds like a metronome counting down. You're not the only one watching. The message had no logo, no handwriting to trace. But the paper was thick, hospital grade, and the font was too polished to be accidental. It didn't scare her. Not really. But it made something clear. She wasn't just dealing with malpractice. She was dealing with a machine. At 9:12 a.m., she returned to Mercy West. Not as a nurse, as a witness. Security didn't stop her. The front desk receptionist made a quiet call when she walked in, but no one dared block her path. Not anymore. She took the stairs. She didn't like elevators when things got political. At the top floor, the boardroom door was already cracked open. They were expecting her. Inside were 8 executives, including Dr. Hess, now seated in a wheelchair with oxygen tubes and a silk blanket covering his legs. His eyes tracked her like a hawk. Also present, a woman in a sharp gray suit, Margot Lynn, corporate counsel from the holding company that owned Mercy West. Margot smiled like a person who'd already written your ending. "Ms. Adebayo," she said coolly, "let's speak plainly, shall we?" The offer was on the table in less than 60 seconds. Full reinstatement, back pay, a quiet promotion, no public statement, no criminal charges filed against Dr. Hess. And in return, Margot added, "You signed this non-disclosure agreement and turn over the flash drive." Layo looked at the folder. The paper was smooth, expensive, pre-signed in 3 places. Dr. Hess said nothing, but he was watching her, waiting, hoping. She ran a finger along the folder's edge. "So I keep my job," she said, "if I help you bury 7 deaths." Margot's smile didn't change. "You're not burying anything. You're protecting a system. And yourself." Silence. Someone coughed. Layo pulled the NDA toward her. Read it top to bottom. Then she slowly, deliberately tore it in half, then into quarters. Then again. She let the pieces fall to the table like ash. "No," she said. "I think I'll take the other option." 2 days later, the story broke. Front page, digital and print. Whistleblower nurse uncovers fatal pattern at Mercy West. Inside, file excerpts, redacted transcripts, the anonymous testimony of 3 other nurses who'd come forward after Layo's lead. The hospital tried to spin it, blamed systemic oversight failures. But the audit had already begun. Doctor has resigned under medical stress. Margot Lynn was reassigned to Strategic Compliance Reorganization. The board dissolved its clinical review committee within 48 hours. But none of that was the victory. The real victory came in room 412. It was quiet there, a private patient suite, sunlight spilling across white sheets and beeping monitors. The woman in the bed was 86. Stage 2 heart failure. Layo had checked her chart 3 times. No overdoses, no overrides, no suspicious dosages. Just a patient, just a nurse. "You're her?" the woman asked, eyes soft but sharp. "The one from the news?" Layo smiled faintly. "Depends what channel." "My granddaughter showed me the clip. You were calm. I like that." Layo adjusted the 4-line gently. "Not much rattles me anymore," she said. "You save people." Layo paused. "Not all of them." The woman nodded slowly. "That's not your fault, but it is your legacy." Layo sat in the chair beside her, and for the first time in weeks, she let herself breathe. She didn't fight to be a hero. She fought to be heard. In a system built to silence her, she spoke anyway. And now, the ones who dismiss her as just a nurse are the ones rewriting their job descriptions. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Help amplify the voices that are often ignored. New stories every week.